Wild night.
Oh, I mean, I don't care much about that. I might throw it in the river.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. To begin with, let's talk about the influence that art history has played in your work. Obviously, that's a major theme. We see Cubism, we see a lot of things at play, but you seem to push it further than that. So there's a lyrical quality and color play that are unique to your voice. Could you tell us about what drew you to the Cubist movement, first of all, and maybe a brief explanation for Cubism, just in case someone isn't familiar?
Yes. Well, Cubism, as you guys know, I guess the father of Cubism, it's a style of art that a lot of us are probably familiar with through the works of Picasso, Georges Braque, Juan Gris. There are two kinds of Cubism. Basically, it's the whole idea of taking an object or person or something that's animate or inanimate and actually getting a 360 view of it, kind of dissecting the anatomy of what we see around us and showing all perspectives all in one piece. It's the prelude to what would be abstraction and what kind of came out of the Impressionist movement with artists like Paul Cézanne, who was a major influence for someone like Picasso. I am drawn to it for some reason. When I was sitting in art history class, based upon my personal aesthetic as an artist, it seemed like it clicked. When we got to modern art or the modernist movement, and I started, okay, we got through Van Gogh, and I'm not saying got through Van Gogh, I mean, don't get me wrong. Things that we're familiar with, Impressionists, it's kind of lining up, it's kind of getting groovy, it's kind of getting less, things are kind of getting exciting, right? And then you get to Cézanne, you're like, okay, and then, I don't know when it happened, but it happened when I started looking at the works of maybe some of the artists after that movement, like maybe Juan Gris, Georges Braque, Fernand Léger, Franz Marx, and artists from maybe the Bauhaus movement, like Kandinsky and Paul Klee. But Picasso was, I guess, the leader of that. But that work spoke to me because throughout my whole life, I created paintings and drawings that had an all-over compositional climax, where the foreground and the background are one and the same. It's not about positive and negative space. It's not about this is the subject, this is the background. That's not really what it's about. It's about activating the pictorial arena that we know. And the positive and negative space is just as important. I remember when drawing my characters as a kid, and my dad, sitting with my dad as he was maybe sketching or showing me how to sketch, actually noticing how the shapes within the negative space was just as interesting as the positive space. And then this whole attention to detail and fragmentation of form, it wasn't about what I was drawing as much as it was how it was drawn. I found myself being interested in patterns and shapes rather than actually the content of what I was creating. And I think that leans towards maybe other movements in art, like Art Nouveau or even Art Deco. But that's where my love from it came from. And of course, as we know, a lot of these movements I just mentioned, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, were all derived from non-Western art, which was fueling a lot of the European thought of concept of art in general. So I guess we can trust, turn the root of what I do as non-Western style of art, but in the root of it is Cubism. So it has that kind of vibe. And now I've taken it a step further where I actually look at some of the Cubist compositions by some of these masters that inspired me and kind of take on some of the motifs. So you'll see in a piece back there, the blue still life, which is called, I guess, Composer with Violin. It's gonna be hard for me to remember the titles of these things, and we'll talk about that. And the few Cubist pieces in there, they actually are kind of like symbols of maybe my studio. Like I'll have a guitar laying on top of the paint jar, I'll have paint on my guitar. My guitar, like, I don't know, I have a hard time, I hang my guitar really low when I play, so sometimes that little screw that's on the back end of it tears off, so I'll duct tape actually my strap to my guitar. I'm very kind of punk rock, kind of like I don't care, I'm not that Clapton-esque kind of person, a player. But it's just that's what I do, like kind of a montage or claviloux of different forms that I live with that help me create and have helped me see. And when I have students come over or assistants, I'm like, get the oxide red and mix it with the white, and they just look at this mound of just stuff. They're like, what? And they don't get this, they can't see it. I'm like, it's over here. Can't you see that? Whatever. But that's the Cubist to me. It's like a montage of just wild living, wild shapes.
Fantastic. So we kind of touched on this already, but were there other periods of art history that moved you other than abstraction?
Well, initially, I really thought the figure was where I wanted to go with my work. I really thought that was where I wanted to be. And then I remember in art school, these questions would arise where they would talk about, well, why is the figure standing this way? What's the figure doing? What's the mood? How is light hitting the figure? What's the ethnicity of this figure? What are the clothes? Why are they wearing this? All these questions, and as a guy who just really wants to just get in there and execute compositions that speak to me spiritually, I was like, man, I'm just gonna back off of that. So I just kind of like slowly but surely, even after studying light drawing and knowing the figurative form, I just kind of just was like, no, I can do my thing anyway without that. So, but so there was a beginning interest in the figurative form and other movements in art history, but I look at art history as what I see on Instagram. When you're working on a painting, and I look at what you're doing in your studio, after it's posted, it's art history. And I also look at the artists that I know around me, the artists who, like, Cynthia Lockhart, Mary Bar Rhodes, so many others who are every day working and creating history that I can talk to, conversate with, and Latina over there, and just see what they're doing in the studio and actually just live with what they're doing. And it's really cool because it's right then and there. It's happening right there. So to me, art history is kind of a continual thing that's actually happening in real time, not just in the past and decades, but as we exist.
Yeah, you kind of bring it in and incorporate it into your practice and dialogue with it in the moment. Well, what other art forms then influence your work? Music, architecture, literature, film?
Yeah, I think when you send me these questions, and I was thinking about, the first thing that popped out was film. And I guess when I think about how film has inspired my work, it would have to be, well, there's two areas of my work. I remember when moving to over the Rhine and remembering what my professors would tell me about paint what you know, draw what you know. I started really taking on the aspect of just looking at my environment and painting my environment, and drawing my environment. And so when you look at paintings like maybe this one, or drawings, excuse me, Street Rhythms #3, that's me looking at architecture that was around me, the cracks in the pavement, the sounds of the street, the environment. Over the Rhine at one point in time was a place of what one would call imperfection, if you will, where you had, a fully remodeled home next to a home that's like falling apart or whatnot. But the cracks in the pavement, that imperfection, the tagging, not necessarily graffiti as an art form, but actually the quick tag of somebody's signature, like on a brick wall. Those are the gestural movements that were kind of like the classroom for me. And, taking light drawing and doing a gestural rendering. That was my language. So that's a great example of how architecture played a part in my work. But then as I was getting kind of tired of being known as the person who looks at architecture and reconfigures it and gets you to look at things differently in an urban environment, I started really just breaking down and just trying to find my new way of what I wanted to create, because there was an essence of me wanting to create portraiture from the inside out rather than outside in, and this idea of anatomy being internal human anatomy being subject matter within itself. So what would end up happening when I would look at these medical books, and as you can see in this drawing right here, Anatomical Rhythms #4, where I'm trying to create the inner spirit of what music was doing for me in that period of time in my life, and just in general. So that language that you see in my work, and especially the abstract stuff, is based in Cubism, but also it's this kind of inner combustion of sound. So that's where a lot of that influence is coming from. But moving out of wanting to return to that and out of the architecture, I found myself just getting into this guy called George Ennis, this American landscape painter from Philadelphia. I was asked by the Taft Museum of Art to do a lecture about this guy. And the whole idea was to talk about how his experiences in Spain and Europe influenced his artwork. But what I found was his interest in Swedenborgianism, where he believed that God was in every single item or thing in nature, like the bark on the trees, the grassy blades, everything. And so there started to become this luminous quality in his art, and a luminous quality in the forest. So when I started looking at that, and I'm the kind of person I watch a movie over and over. I'm a Pisces, so we tend to watch the same thing over and over again, finding a deeper meaning in it. So one of my favorite movies by John Borman, if you guys know the director, he directed Deliverance, he directed Emerald Forest, and he directed Excalibur, okay? And listening to him talk about in these movies the decisions he made and how he would light the forest up with green lights to give it more of a luminous quality and this romantic essence to it. I started thinking about my environments. Though they were very dense and tight, I wanted things to breathe, to actually show the rhythm of the music, of the vibration that's happening when I create work abstractly, and letting things breathe. So that's a great example of how film has played an influence. And I also within music, I think, even though I use music as a subject matter, as parts and shapes that relate to the masculine and the feminine, because I think the guitar itself relates to that or reflects that, I think there's also this vibe of the musical composition being the same as the artistic composition, where you have parts and shapes moving as the same, right? A change in brushstroke being a change in volume or a gesture or a crescendo. You know, I haven't really learned how to crescendo too much. It's just really like bam, you know. But I think there are subtle things when you look deeper into the pieces, maybe. But that's basically how other influences are implied in my work.
Great. So moving beyond influences, how do you take those influences and bring them into your practice? What does a day in the studio look like for you?
Well, it's listening to a lot of YouTube. A lot of interesting health tips to listen to while you're painting. Various forms of music, but it really, actually, when I paint, even though I'm thinking about rhythm and music and this vibe and this motion of parts relating to each other, it's usually a lot of talk radio and stuff like that, and sport, and like football season, so it's like a lot of sports talk, but and sports gossip or whatnot. But I think the day in the studio, it depends on what's going on. Like, for example, getting ready for this show, it was about intense work. It was never me on my laptop. It was me telling people when I would occasionally look at my laptop or look at my phone or email, I'm like, please call me because I don't want to text. I'd rather just you call me. I have my headset on, my big old headphones, and we can talk. I've worked on compositions by talking to somebody about all kinds of things. So it's usually me just painting continuously the whole entire time. What I found in my later years as a painter is that I remember maybe in 2010 I'll be working on a work of art, and I would think that working on work means you're constantly figuring it out, lifting the brush, pushing and pulling paint, trying to figure it out, or even just stalling at over concentrating on an area that's working so well, and then creating another mess to where you just totally screws up everything. Well, now it's about, you like what's working, but you know something needs to change. And you might just sit there in that studio, handling everything else, maybe watching a movie, maybe just sit back, and then looking at the painting occasionally, and just actually thinking the painting through. What would happen if I changed the background to orange? And you're so experienced in this thing called art, or like you like to think you are, right? That you play the tape through in your mind, and you say, no, that won't work. And then you just sit there, and then you go back to doing what you're doing, go to a board meeting or something like that, and then you come back to the painting, and you look at it again, it wasn't even in the background. That's cool. That's great. And then it's just be one little thing you change, and that's all you do for that day. You're 4 hours in the studio, but you'll just rock out something for 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And that handles the issue. That takes you to the next level, to where a few more steps and you're done. So it's a lot more observing, a lot more living with the work and kind of existing with it and knowing what the next move is.
Yeah, I always like to say that an important step of the artistic practice is putting it across the room and just glaring at it for a couple hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Having kind of a stare off with the piece. But so even with those moments of seeming inactivity, you were actively contemplating the work.
Mm-hmm.
You still were very prolific this year, with over how many new pieces in 2020?
23 new pieces for this exhibition, but when I think about, thank you. But when you think about the artist residencies that I participated in, and overseeing some of the group projects I did in communities and schools. We're probably talking maybe even up to maybe 25, 28 or something like that. But you know, that's a big group effort, you know what I mean? That's like, you know, everybody's getting a sheet of paper, block it in, and then, you know, you're doing it. But it's amazing. I mean, I walked into January, after getting done with a lot of these residencies that kind of bled into February of this year, I walked into January with the studio empty. I think a lot of the pieces I took to Atlanta because Black Art in America really wanted a new body of work, so I sent them 9 paintings. And then a gallery in New Jersey, Aquaba Gallery, they wanted to exhibit my work, so I gave them 7 or 8 paintings. And then the rest of my work's over at Isley Gallery. And then I have some work over at Artsville here in Cincinnati. And here we are, the blank studio. There was no like, okay, well, I'll just show like a little bit of old stuff, you know. It's a big space, They'll understand from crying out loud. That's not how I think. If I'm gonna invite you and take the time to have you guys come down and check out what I'm doing and bombard you with emails, bombard you on Facebook, and just lay into you like, you gotta come. It's here, it's now, it's happening. Are you ready? You know, if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna make sure you're gonna see at least half the show of new work and me highlight that new work and take the time. So I remember going into January with my first 3 paintings being this one that I believe it's called Planted to Proceed, or Planted to Progress, or Planted to Prosper, excuse me, Planted to Prosper. And I remember that was going to be in Paul's show, but I just didn't like it. I painted the whole thing blue and just let it sit for a long time. And then, but I knew it was gonna work, even though I painted over everything. I'm just looking at this big blue space of nothing, and I'm just like, man, it's gonna work. And I just went at it. And then, you know, that musician and the moon. And then when I went back into knowing I wanted to carry out the whole, the florals or plants and vases, this floral still life idea, I went right into this one piece where I believe it's in the other gallery. Majority of the newer work is in the other gallery, but it's a piece with what would be like an African or Native American vase, and then you have this pink plant coming out of it, but then this mud cloth tapestry just battling with it, pushing and pulling. And that's probably a piece I worked on consistently, even the last piece. So January's paintings were still being painted even up until maybe 2 months ago. And but you keep moving forward, you know, I mean, I gotta keep it rolling. And you just keep rolling, and the whole idea with this exhibition, I wanted this to be the beginning of me exploring various genres within my work, not just having the whimsical abstraction, which I believe I'm still elevating in different ways, but to expand on themes that I always wanted to do, maybe themes from, like, example, the woman dancing, and that coming from an idea that happened many, many years ago, but actually Cynthia Lockhart inviting me to participate in the Juneteenth exhibition, and me knowing that I wanted that to be a time to pay homage to the artists who have been a part of my real art history that kind of groomed me in this city. So I wanted that piece to be attributed to that, but that worked out so great. I was like, man, I want to do another one. So I'm probably gonna do another one. Will it be the same model? Probably not, but it's the whole idea of me paying homage to maybe figurative artists from my past that means something to me. So you have the whimsical abstraction, you have the figurative. Then you have the still life, and the still life, not the cubist still life, but the floral still life, or the plant still life, which is a reference towards my upbringing and living with my father, my mother, of course, and actually being in a home where art was not only appreciated, but my dad was an interior designer, if you will. And I think Cynthia, when I bring it up you a lot, but you remember living with your mother changing things around and shifting pots and not pots, but vases, and moving things and adjusting pillows, and just being aware, you as a creative mind, and knowing when things are changing around you and paying attention, and then watching other people value those things, which creates an appreciation for the arts beyond just taking you to the museum or showing you how to sketch, but just always trying to find something new with what you live with. So that's what those pieces are coming from. So you get figurative, the cubist still life, what we already talked about, the whimsical abstraction, and the floral still life. And then you have, I think that might be it. Then you have the landscape or the cityscapes, which reference some of the projects that I've done in the past with the black and white cityscapes would reference a project I was going to do with Children's Hospital. It ended up changing into something else and evolving into something else, but I love the whole idea of just a limited palette, and that within itself, with the use of black and white, creating kind of a cultural, I don't want to say stance, but conversation about space. And maybe it's a conversation for others, me it's just positive and negative space coexisting, but in the same time, I guess that's what I'm all about, and my work is all about. And then also the vivid, what I call the vivid villages, which is my return to my interest in architecture, but really understanding it's not necessarily about the environment of living in Oberryan, because I no longer live there, but it's about using whatever I can, whatever as a catalyst, architecture, to create interesting pictorial arrangements within a composition. And hopefully that becoming a new world or a new place of living for your mind and your spirit as you're looking at it. So those are the different genres within that I battled with. And I would just almost flip a coin in the studio, like, okay, or at the beginning of every month or towards the end of every month, like, okay, what's the next body of work? You just keep rolling, keep moving, and it's fun, it's exciting. Yeah, there's some times where you just sit there and you just don't know what's happening with the painting, but you just keep rolling. I think a lot of us as artists, and the way we think, if the form is strong, then, and we know the form is strong, then it must be the color. And if something's wrong with the color, then it must be the form. You know, it's one of the two. You know, it's just figuring out which one is which, and then exceeding and, you know, the boundaries, and then just crushing it, moving forward.
So it's a little bit of intuition and systems that you built for yourself. Like
exactly.
Playing with both of those structures. So how do you know when a piece is finished? I bet you love that question.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, you don't know, but you just keep, like, for example, like the one I kept working on, I mean, I swear, Planned It to Prosper, I changed the base or the vase in that particular piece at least 7 times. And when I finally found the right vase, and as beautifully as rendered as it is, where you can actually grab it, imagine me having it beautifully rendered and it just being 1 inch too tall. And I just, you know, but I've been there before. Like, there's this piece at the Taft Museum of Art where I had a figure floating within space. But I was looking at this figure and it was floating away out of space. And I was like, man, why is she not hanging out with the other figures? Because she's floating in different directions. And so it was one of those moments where I smiled, because I know God's gonna bless me for doing the extra effort. Because that's what it is. That's what we do. That's what it is. We will say, oh, you know what? All right, cool, bet. I gotta paint it again. And we just do it lovingly and happily. I mean, granted, if it was due the next day, it would, but you know, but that's what we do. We do, if we want what we feel is greatness within ourselves, without the accolades of, you know, what, you know, the larger community. We know it first has to start with what's in your heart. It first has to start with your appreciation and how you value yourself and your work ethic. So you make that change. So when I had to realize I had to just shift it down, there was nowhere else for the plant to go. I couldn't like push it off the page. I couldn't like, you know, so I just chopped it up, added a little bit more of the plant, and then just did it again. And that's what we do. But that's you don't know you're done until it feels right. And then, you know, with these larger pieces, because of my experience with murals, they appear to come faster and quicker because it's just a larger shape and form to paint. But I'm finding myself pushing myself in the very end by waiting to do these larger paintings towards the end of this body of work. And so I am saying to myself, why? It's like a month in, and I'm like, why am I waiting until the last minute on these big paintings? You know? But it works, I guess, because at the end you battle like you've had all year long to do it. We just had 7 months, maybe. But that's what you do. You just make it happen, and you just keep it rolling. And that's what it is. And you know when you're done when it feels good. And if you're working in a series, you don't want the piece to outshine the others, but it has to have that own identity that separates itself. and feels good for you and stands on its own, not because it's part of a series and maybe this way, we'll change it this way. No, it stands strong on its own and it complements your idea as well as the other pieces.
I love it. So after you finally get to that point where it's finished, is that when you name it? Or do you have the name in mind beforehand?
Yeah, I try to name it beforehand just so I can, maybe that will actually push my mind into maybe changing something about it to make it visually more stimulating certain things. Like maybe I'll con myself and like, I've been noticing doing that, like it's not finished, so maybe I'll just say a word that maybe describes where it's at right now, like, and it doesn't work. Usually, and I was naming these pieces right up to the moment. How you doing? Right up to the moment. So, gosh, it was one of those things where that's what you do. You wait till the very end that you're comfortable with it. I mean, and just like glowing with grace. That I knew that was the name. I knew is what I was feeling. It's what's happening. Some of this is, easy. Vivid Village, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's real simple. Abundance, number 3, number 4, number 1. But then there's some that just stand alone that are just a part of the ongoing journey of the whimsical abstraction that kind of just call for something special or different and unique. And yeah, I think the pink one in the back, let me see if I can remember the name for that one. Oh, that's easy. I said it right there, the pink one. Soft Parade, number 2, I believe. Is that what it says? Or number 3?
Can we get a fact check? 3,
Yes.
We have a 3.
Yeah, number 3. So it just worked. Like, oh, that reminds me, it's pink background, pink. Soft Parade, that's right. So that's what we do. That's what we do.
There's a little bit of poetry in that. It's
Yeah.
intuition that you're building on, for
Exactly.
sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
So playing with that intuitive approach, is there a methodology that you use when choosing a color palette, or is it purely intuition?
I think color.
And play, I guess.
It's intuition to a certain degree. I think there's a point where you have a game plan of where you want to start with the color, and I'm looking at not only art history. I was talking to Kelly Phelps, who is an instructor here, and we were talking about how to motivate the kids, to push them to keep proceeding on, and how to not just work straight out of the tube or whatnot. And I was telling him, well, we should always get the students to maybe look at art history as a reference. And I mentioned how I might show my wife a painting and be like, look at that, isn't that great? And she'll just see what maybe is happening in the painting. But what I'm interested in, maybe in this a figurative masterpiece, I might be interested in the olive floor next to the pink flesh tone with the turquoise gown. I'm zeroing in on a certain area that's the next combo for one of my pieces. And those are the answers that are happening. So I guess when you're thinking about the palette and the color and how you do that, you're pulling from all your resources that you could totally find to make that happen. And did that answer the question?
It totally did.
Okay.
I mean, it feels like it touches on themes that we've already talked about,
Right.
with you pulling from your environment, from other inspirations, art history, and just kind of pushing them together into these rhythmic, lyrical pieces that are playful and exciting to look at. At least I think so. But we've kind of already touched on this, and this is the last question before I wrap up.
Okay.
But is there a cadence to your creation? You've said that you have a system for kind of themes or bodies of work that you set aside a month to work on this collection. Is that how you have always worked? Or is that something that you've developed for yourself?
I think I'm the kind of person that says yes to everything. So and I'm very fortunate. I have to admit, and I was talking to Kelly about this. Most of the opportunities that have happened in my career have been because I've been invited. I was invited to exhibit here. I was invited to exhibit at the CAC, at the Taft Museum of Art. And so these are great things. And what I wanted to do special with this body of work is actually create a body of work that's not for, that a lot of these pieces are not for sale. That it's going to be a continuation of things that I want to carry on and take out of Cincinnati and other places. So it's going to be a lot of me actually asking to persuade other audiences to take in this work, and that's the main purpose. So I think this idea of just really pounding the work out and pushing it out is something that will never stop. I think now that this work is completed, now it's time to add on. And will I consider myself still a gallery artist? Yes, but also now it's time to take it into educational facilities. Now it's time to take it into more opportunities like this, where the themes can exist and coexist in both areas, in both arenas. So I see myself in the work ethic, you know, staying the same. And how this happens, you know, Kitty asked me to be a part of the Xavier family of artists in exhibiting in this gallery, I think as early as 2018 or maybe 19, when we were both still working over at Gallery 708. But I would always have these gallery exhibitions that I was getting ready for, and I had Proner or Paul Kroner's or Kroner Studios, or I had Isaac Gallery happening, and then whatever I had before that, you know, all these solo exhibitions that have been happening consecutively year after year. And then what ended up happening was me clearing the desk with that stuff, taking a deep breath and just saying, okay, if we're gonna do this, let's make it count. Let's hold on to this stuff. You know, there's a certain joy and pride. I really get why people collect my work, not because they like it, because it's, besides the fact it's a one of a kind, besides it's now theirs to keep and to hold, you know, and to have forever. There's something when you're living with something you own that's so special, and to say that's mine. And I know I'm gonna get real spiritual about this. Like, it's a piece of me in your home. And that sounds so corny, you know what I mean? Like, it's a piece of my soul. You know, and you know what I mean? It does. Let's be honest. It's goofy. It's goofy. All right. Because I mean, I'd be still rocking and rolling if I didn't paint. You know what I mean? Because I think I have a spirit and creativity that goes beyond. I have more to offer than this, maybe I don't know. But this is what I do, so I pay homage to it and I honor it. And I'm very blessed and honored to be able to do it. But the cool thing about this and some of these pieces is that they're mine. These are mine now. When I have the little tag that says not for sale or not at this time, you have the right price, maybe. You know, that whole feeling of just ownership is just fantastic. Knowing, and also there's this feeling of like, this is your, like, look at that blue painting back there, and the composer and the, it's getting all the attention, I'm just talking about it so much. Composer and the violin, looking at that painting and saying, you're mine, that's the kind of pride that I know my collectors have for my work, but I understand that now, that this is mine. I made this and this is mine. It's not something I made and dropped off at Isley Gallery and we have an opening and I occasionally see it every once in a while. That maybe, if I'm lucky, I made it earlier in that whole year of creating work for that. So I had a chance to live with it and dirty it up and kick it around a few times. I have to paint the edges before I give it to Isley. Or it's painted the night before and then it sells and you don't see it again. And God forbid if they say, well, we really are going on vacation, we want the piece now, and you have to put something else in its place. And hopefully they're not in the audience, but, you know, I don't think they are, God bless them. But I'm thinking about the piece right now. But but it's one of those things that now it's like, no, this is mine. This is mine for now. This is mine for now, and I love it. It is cool, man. It's way cool. It's like keeping a childhood drawing, even though they're new and fresh. But it's like keeping a childhood drawing that captures that moment in time in your life, and the joy of figuring out the right answers and getting it. And also, even though when they come back home in a couple of weeks, I'm gonna wrap them up and put them somewhere and I'll look at them. And I'll be facing that blank studio that I'm facing right now. About to embark on some pieces. I'll be at Antonia Adams' show the same day that this show closes. I'm trying to work on 2 paintings for his next exhibition at Isaac Gallery. So it's one of those things where I will face that blank studio with pride, just the same way I faced the blank studio with pride in January of this year. You know, like it's time to go to work. They're gone. They're either in Jersey, they're here, they're there, they're gone, they're wrapped up in some other home, and that's what it is. But yeah, but they're mine. This is mine. So, you know, I'm very honored to share this with you. All of you guys, you know, I know most of you. There are some new faces, but you guys, my work is about bringing people together. My father always wanted his sons to be able to walk into environments and to own it, to be able to walk into anywhere, any place and feel welcome. And I'm very fortunate that when I decided to do this art thing, or actually have the courage to walk in to a gallery in Over the Rhine and tell Susan Terrell I'm an artist, and maybe, you know, maybe they did have like behind, oh really, you know, maybe they did, but I was so, you know, bushy-tailed and so like, yeah, I'm an artist. Maybe I didn't notice or anything like that, but there was this vibrancy and this openness and this humility that I had about an untainted vibe I had about the arts community in this. And the reason why I do what I do and I step outside of myself to really critically look at what I look at and maybe teach a little bit harder to the children and tell them what they need to do and get really intense and worry. Like I was telling you, I was concerned about the kids making sure they understand this new project I'm doing with the Taft Museum of Art. It's because I care about them getting the arts, because it's a part of my survival. Them not knowing what I'm doing and why I'm doing it makes me question, why am I doing this? It's important for everybody to get it. I'm not one of these snide little artists that actually say, oh, it's cool, it's just an inside thing. No, that's not me. This is for everybody. This is for everybody to be included and to be a part of art history and to be a part of this moment. And you're all invited, everybody's on board, and that's what I do. That's how I work. And maybe those ideas will open doors for me, and maybe those ideas will maybe have some doors maybe shut. But I don't care. I'm standing 10 toes down on my idea of beauty, my aesthetic, my vision, and my rhythm. And that's what it is all day. So that's what keeps me working. So thank you guys.
Thanks everyone for coming. We have plenty of refreshments, so help yourselves, and we'll be around to chat.
Yeah, do you guys want any questions? You guys any questions or?
Oh yeah, please.
So you are a musician, and when I look at a lot of your work, I see musical notes, I see like this piece behind you is just magnificent. A lot of movement and a lot of music in there. So are you listening to a certain type of music when you're painting a piece?
Yeah, I am. I was listening to a lot of Jefferson Starship. When I was working, and Tiffany was with me, and we were, and it was cool because I knew she was coming over, and and I wanted something. Our musical tastes are slightly different unless we're going out dancing and listening. You know, she's not into Maiden, she's not into, you know, Ice Cube and everything like that. But she could, you know, sometimes. But you know, it's one of those things where I remember just listening to those songs as I was working on both of these, and she was helping me prime some things and getting everything, you know, set up and all that stuff. And so that was really fun. That was really great, you know. And I love like documentaries and rockumentaries, like especially the one about I want to say Gerald Levert, but it's goodness, he sang on Sesame Street. Help me out, people. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross. And just listening to those and those artists' influences, and like his influence was Dionne Warwick, right? And so I find myself like I don't even get through his documentary because I'm like, oh, you like her too? All right, on. And so next thing you know, I'm pulling out my Dionne Warwick and my Burt Bacharach stuff. I'm listening to all that stuff. And then, you know, it's just great. I mean, it's really great. But see, sometimes the music is a distraction because I'll hear those songs I haven't heard in a long time. And next thing you know, I'll put the paintbrush down, get out my guitar, and just, Jesus. You don't get anything done. It's almost like Stephen A. Smith, you know, with that sports announcer. He's like, you know, he's like my spiritual guru more than the music. Or just hearing sports talk. It's like it keeps you separated from that stuff, you know. For example, Stephen A. Smith. Maybe I kind of like him. He's actually.
And I know that, Cedric, you are very spiritual, and I think about the times of year. I know you said you started in January with this blank slate, which is great. But does the time of year influence colors, the direction that you go in? Is that connected at all?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the time of year relating to projects has a big effect. I think summertime hits, I feel like there's still like this idea that you think you have time, even though I'm not a teacher anymore. There's this feeling that you think you have time, but I'm involved in a lot of after-school programs throughout the year, but you really don't. So I think when I think of summer, I think of don't get fooled, man. Time is short. That's the vibe maybe we always had as kids. You know, like the last day of school, I wasn't really looking at calendars when I was a kid. I didn't really start looking at calendars until like I got into college. Literally, I would just kind of have a vibe of when something's due. It's like next Wednesday, okay. Right? Okay, gotcha. Oh, it's Christmas, right? On next week, I just didn't think about it. But now I do. And when summer hits, there's like this countdown feeling. Even I'm not a teacher anymore. There's still this countdown. Like, man, get it done. Don't get fooled. It's only 11 months, man. Just get it together. And it's not because of the warm weather. It's just my mindset. And people are out of town. And usually I'm gearing, and maybe that's the curtain call. Maybe that's like, okay, usually I try to aim my shows in the fall, so I really know, like, hey, stop messing around, man. You got 11 weeks, countdown. So that's what affects me.
Did anyone else? I saw that hand first.
Yes.
And Cedric, when you're in a flow for, a good period of time, and all of a sudden you get a commission, and I know you do a lot of commission works, large and small, and corporate and residential, and they want something specific. And I know for myself, it changes my rhythm.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to get back into it, and when you get back into it, you're different.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that, because you do so many different things?
Right. I think I know what you're saying. Now, when you said that, I remembered several commissions I had during that month of January. How did I do it? Well, here's an example. If they want something within the realm of where I'm constantly existing in with my abstract forms and my shapes and my journey, cool. If they're telling me to just do a specific stylized version of the Cincinnati landscape, but I want specific details in it because I work at this organization, I'm cool with that too. But that might take me a little bit longer because I want to approach it not like I need to get this out of the way. I really take step by step and make sure it's tight and right because it's not within that realm, of a creation. So I make sure that I step outside of myself and give myself enough time, and also just pace and work with the client. Now, if it's a major deadline where you have to have it done, then you shut things down. You have to step it up. I think you have to get paid. You know what I mean? That this is all what if money. There's a lot of exhibitions where it's like a lot of what if money. And I think we don't just do art like to get paid or what if money. But you're taking a chance on how well it's going to identify with the audience, if somebody's going to buy it or whatnot, or add in their museum's collection or whatnot. But you clearly have a clear distinction of money now versus the what if money. So you prioritize, you know what I mean? Because it fuels this. It fuels the what we like to think is the bigger picture, which is the luxury of saying I'm going to hold on to 23 paintings for now. Yes, Richard.
This might be a mildly similar question. You mentioned working in a body of work.
Yes.
Is that the same thing as working in a series? Part two of that question is, if you have paintings that are tagged 1, 2, and 3, are those works somehow in conversation with each other visually, or is just naming something 1, 2, and 3 a matter of like, I'm thinking of it in this way, or this way? Could you kind of like elucidate on any, did you understand the question?
Yes. First, I'll work from the last part, which is 1, 2, and 3, and naming them like that. Usually, it's sometimes a feeling or color that reminds me, or the subject itself. Never the scale. That's the interesting thing about it. For example, Soft Parade, the first Soft Parade was a graphite drawing.
It's a Doors album, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's one thing. I name a lot of my pieces after albums. So we got Soft Parade, love that album. God, love that album. And Soft Parade, and I don't think there's another title after any other songs, but I think that might be the only thing in here. All right, Soft Parade started off as a long graphite drawing, and I just loved how that felt. And then a couple of years later, I run into this pink piece that I want to do, Soft Parade, and Soft Parade number 3, it's pink. It just has that vibe and that feel to it. The way these structures are kind of looping up and down like that, it just has that, reminds me of stuff to do. But as far as like doing a series of work, to your first question, I don't see it as 1, 2, and 3, let's just sit this month and work on 3 cityscapes. I don't do that. That's rough, because I feel like that's just rough, man. You know what I mean? It's just visually for my mind, it just doesn't, it's just hard. The closest thing that happened to that was maybe in 1 month, I worked on the black and white cityscapes over there. I think that was something I did within a month's time that related to each other, because I was so anxious to pull it off and see how it felt. But most of the time, I'll space it out to make sure I'm pulling the best out of something based upon its own merit, rather than the sequence of how it relates to pieces that it was done within that period of time. And like Abundance, I haven't done an Abundance piece since 2022, but because I wanted to do an all green, lush environment of one, I'll pull out number 4 on a bigger way, on a different scale size than ever before. So it's just one of those things.
Can I ask you one more?
Yes.
It's way different than those other ones. You mentioned George Brock and Picasso and the giants, right? So as a cubist or neo-cubist, do you find that you gotta kind of like in a certain way slay them? So you can be yourself, or would you say that you're more like standing on the shoulders of this sort of concept?
I think what they did was very bold. I think without a doubt, there are questions I asked back when I started appropriating from Cubist painters and some of their styles, some of their work, and making it my own, and just really shifting things around, but changing little things and kind of doing my own version of it. I really started looking at why they were doing what they were doing and saying, why didn't they just push it to the next level here? Why didn't they push it to the next level here? And they could have, man. They did it because they had to make that bold stance spiritually. And that is not just less is more, stupid phrases like that, but that strength and command that you get with form that says, this is it, this is who I am, this is what this is going to be, and it's powerful enough. And I believe Linnell, we were both looking at a painting by an abstract painter who taught at the Art Academy, and it was over at the Modern Show over at Cincinnati Art Galleries, and Linnell really loved. Now he's a man that has the piece, him and his wife had that big, really intricate architectural piece in a hallway, and they had various things in their collection. But there was a gestural mark that this artist made in his piece, and he had just like 3 gestural marks, and that had so much power to it and confidence to say, that's enough, I'm gonna frame it, I'm gonna mount it, sign it, and it's presented, that's enough. And the same artist might have more expansive works within this kind of genre, but I think that's why they did what they did. They could have done more, but they decided this is enough, because it's a spiritual stance within themselves to create a vocabulary. Sometimes when you talk visually, you have a speech, you have a verbiage, you have a poem, you have something you're writing, literature, whatever. Sometimes you make a stance with a few words and you say enough without going on and on and on. And I think that's what these artists do. So I totally get what they're doing, and I love what they're doing, and I feel like I don't have to necessarily crush them. I just feel like, yeah, that's everybody else. How about that? That's people in my history. No, sir. But it's not necessarily that. It's it's one of those things that just admiring their bravery of what they were doing, and just really, I think, standing on that idea of bravery, and just saying, you know, I used to think of silhouettes, making a shape and filling it in. Really, the line is a silhouette, the line itself against the white background or the black background with the white chalk line. That is a form. That's an existing real form. So, within itself.
Any last questions?
I have one, just a simple one. Do you do any collaborations with any other artists?
Organizations?
Artists?
Artists.
Any other
Oh, collaboration with other artists. Yeah, I have. I worked with the Black Lives Matter mural. Black Art Speaks, we collaborated on a mural together. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about collaborations. I'm currently working on another project with them at the Cincinnati Convention Center, where another artist came up with the concept, the design, but I'm kind of a, what would you call, a creative consultant, if you will. But it's cool because you have to back yourself off of it, because I would have done, no, just relax. Relax. So it's little steps like that. But when I think about real collaborations I really enjoy that I can think of right now, it's of course with my students, what I'm doing with the Taft Museum of Art. What I'm doing right now, I'm an artist in residence for the Taft Museum of Art, and there are the Artist Reaching Classrooms program called ARC. And I've been doing that since 2009. And the last 2 years, I've been an artist in residence where they just selected myself and another artist, Adora Maxbury, where we go into various classrooms and we do these major projects with 4 schools where we visit them consecutively like 4 times within the school year, early part of the school year. So what ends up happening is with this new project I'm doing, I'm like actually showing them my process and I'm working with them. So that's a big collaboration. Them providing sketches for me and me formulating something. But that's when I think about I'm sure there are more collaborations I've done. I'm sure there are more in-depth things I've done with other visual artists that might be on my level or trajectory. But yeah, I think that's the ones I remember right now.
Any last questions? That it? Yeah.
One more.
So the small one, the one directly behind you, and then a large one as an example. When you were thinking about doing that, in your mind, did you already say that painting couldn't exist on that size, or like the one directly behind you wouldn't work if it was larger? Is that a decision you made before you start?
Yeah, I think when I know I want to do something big, I get out the big drawing paper. Let's be honest, and you just start working. You start making it happen, and then again, there might be a smaller drawing that may just have the smaller forms like that, but you can say, okay, this is good, but let's see what happens if we were expanded even more. I could stay within that same palette and do something larger, but I would probably find nuances that would pull you in within the shapes that are there. Not adding more to the positive and negative aspect, but putting more within the bigger, broader shapes. So there are plenty of drawings and paintings, that's a great question, that some of you might own some smaller pieces of mine that are maybe 5 by 9 inches. And then I'll look back at those drawings I did for those paintings and be like, wow, okay, it's time to take this to the next level. And then I'll draw it again larger, get out the light table, and just really expand upon it. So yeah, the drawings definitely play a part in me deciding how big something's gonna be. But in the end, I definitely, funny you said that. It's funny, that small one, when I hung this thing, and I think you remember that, I was like, man, I really dig that. I want to make a big one of that. So that's amazing you said that. I did say that. You remember that? Yeah.
No one's stopping you.
Yeah, I will. I will.